Welcome to the Healthcare Workforce Podcast, brought to you by Espirita Workforce Solutions. In this series, we're talking to the most influential, agile and diverse leaders across the healthcare industry. We'll get an insight into their unique stories and hear their opinions on the future of health and care in the UK and beyond. This week, we're talking to Dr Simon Le Clerc, Director of Business Development at RMI Global Solutions. With an extensive medical and military background, Dr Le Clerc is a specialist advisor and subject matter expert on a national level, with a unique view of both the NHS and the global healthcare landscapes. His career has spanned many aspects of healthcare, from starting off as a staff nurse in A&E to 24 years spent as a British Army officer, where he served in conflict zones around the world, providing specialist treatment to wounded soldiers, often under fire. A leader, a lecturer, and a member of strategic and executive teams, we're delighted to have him with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Le Clerc. Could you start by sharing some background on how you came to work in the healthcare industry and where it's taken you so far?
So I originally was leaving school and joining the Royal Marines, and went to do recruit selection and ended up getting an injury on the course, which required me ending up going into hospital for some operations. The Royal Marines at that point said, look, it's going to take at least a year for you to get better, reapply in a year, and we'll see how you get on. But in that year, which seems like a very long time, I obviously spent a lot of time in and out hospital, got to know some of the staff and realized that that probably was quite an interesting job as well. So I did my nurse training. I had 5 O-levels, so that's how old I am, 5 O-levels at the time. Went to my nurse training in Birmingham. Really enjoyed that. Started as a staff nurse and then a charge nurse in A&E in Birmingham. And worked there for a couple of years and started my interest in pre-hospital care. So I started working out on the pre-hospital emergency response team. A friend of mine saw an access course to medicine, and it was the first one ever that was run out of Norfolk, and it was validated by Cambridge University. So I applied for that, and I was very lucky I got onto that course, along with 13 others, all of whom had a healthcare background or a degree in some other subject, and with the express intent of going on to do medicine. So I was very lucky I passed that course, and then had a good choice of medical schools, but chose to go to Sheffield just because it kind of fitted my personality, and went to Sheffield University. During that time at Sheffield University, I hadn't really lost the buzz for the military and was working with the Territorial Army back then, the reserves at the time, and then applied for cadetship in the Army. So I was accepted in the third year of medical school and was well and truly ensconced in a military career from there on. I qualified as a doctor. I did my regimental jobs. I worked pretty much with expeditionary forces, airborne, marine, and other small unit working for much of my career. Did 24 years in the Army and specialised in emergency medicine and pre-hospital emergency care. Whilst I was doing that, I was the medical director of an air ambulance charity up in the north of England. So was working constantly really on developing new techniques and procedures and things like that to help save more people's lives. Finally came out of the military approximately 3 years ago and decided to go into the NHS, into a nice quiet department, well, quiet as far as the NHS is concerned, in the Lake District. I'd come across it there because on the helicopter, I'd been to the shootings in Cumbria. And the week before, I'd been to a bus crash in Keswick, school bus crash. So I'd been in and out of this hospital a couple of times in the week, and one of my friends, ex-military guys, worked there. So they'd said to me, if ever you leave the military, why don't you come and work with us? So that's what I did. So we're there for a couple of years, and then the opportunity came to, I was approached by RMI to come and work for them. And with my background, I think they recognized that I understood quite a few of the pinch points within the health service. I'd done my leadership courses in the military. I was a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute. So I had quite a grip on some of the intricacies of how the NHS works or doesn't. And I had quite an interesting culture, organisational culture. So it was probably the right time for me to come away. And since then, I've been working as the business development director for the NHS at RMI.
And in amongst that fascinating career, what are you the most proud of?
Yeah, I've done a lot, but I think the things that stick in my memory are I like to look at challenges and I like to solve challenges. Some of the things I've done have, I like to think, influenced systems and saved lives. So I can go to work on a helicopter and save a life a day, or I can change the system and teach lots of people to save a life a day, and therefore more lives are getting saved. So some of the things I've been involved in, I helped establish what's called the MERT, the Medical Emergency Response Team in Afghanistan in 2006, which effectively became the air ambulance service in Afghanistan. And that was derived with a chap called Andy Griffiths. And we basically modeled that on a civilian air ambulance service. And that allowed us to move casualties all over Afghanistan who were critically injured with a very good success rate. We saved an awful lot of lives of soldiers, civilians, combatants, enemy combatants. You know, from a medical perspective, it didn't really matter who we were going to. We were just sent there to save lives, and that's what we did. So I'm very proud of that. And that system now works across NATO and has been mirrored by an awful lot of other nations. I've seen needs in other areas, so I'm proud. I set up a medical tactical firearms officers course, which trained tactical firearms in Durham and Cleveland and traffic police how to render almost battlefield first aid at the scene of incidents. They would often be the first at a road traffic collision, or they'd be involved in armed sieges and where people might be injured. So giving them the opportunity to render a kind of advanced first aid, giving people a chance to survive. So I'm proud of that course, and that's still ongoing now, many years later. Helped establish the Special Ops Medical Advisor role for the Metropolitan Police Service. So that is access to a dedicated medical team, again, for the high-risk operations the police are involved in, where, again, there might be risk to people, and they want to mitigate that risk where they can. And really, I guess the last thing is being innovative. So I was fortunate enough to be awarded a Winston Churchill traveling fellowship. I went to the US to look at new ways of trying to save lives for people who were bleeding internally from being stabbed or shot, and how best we could try and keep them alive long enough to get to hospital. But part of that meant that I was able to then instigate blood on board for my own air ambulance service. So one of our doctors was tasked with an interest in it, in working that out. And now the Great Northern Ambulance carries blood every day and platelets 24 hours a day. And now several other air ambulance services in the UK are doing that. And that's providing life-saving treatment to people who are bleeding to death at the scene of incidents. So, yeah, so I'm proud in those senses that I've managed to do some things.
And given your experiences in healthcare services for the armed forces, as well as for the NHS, in your opinion, are the two cultures really that different? And if so, are there opportunities, or where are those opportunities for the two to learn from each other?
Well, what shall I do? I'll be diplomatic about this, but yes, there are significant differences in my experience. Having worked in and out of the NHS for 30 odd years, having seen not much change in the culture, particularly, there's a lot that could be done, and I found it quite difficult to work in an organisation that, for several reasons, is up against it, but also doesn't help itself. I think militarily. Personality-wise, it suited me. It's much more of a can-do attitude. It's much more of a problem-solving attitude. It's right, let's do it, and we'll figure out how to do it along the way. Whereas quite a lot of the time in the NHS, when there have been issues or ideas even, and you raise those ideas, you're just told, no, we can't do it. And there's no specific reason behind that. It's just, no, it's out of our comfort zone. We're not doing it. We're not going to look at it.
And what or who do you think is responsible for that culture?
There are two areas. So you can be the best CEO. You can have the best executives board. You can have all the right ideas. You can say all the right things. You can have a vision that will, make the organization fantastic. But if you can't get that down through what I call the influencers within the organization, so they're not necessarily the people high up, they're the people that actually sit there and go, well, I'm not doing that, or, this will never work, it's rubbish. And then they're pushing that narrative down the chain to their people, their line workers, then all of a sudden what you find is nothing gets changed. So although people at the top are creating this idea, it's not getting actually beyond these influences.
Given all that, what would your advice be for the next generation of healthcare leaders?
My advice would be curious, dig into everything. Don't accept everything that you're told as gospel. If you want to know how a system is really operating, get amongst the weeds, talk to the staff, talk to people who are working there day to day, be that in the administrative role or in the clinical role. Find out what their pinch points are and find out who those influencers are that are within the organization that may be scuppering what you're trying to do, or you can work with to help change the narrative. So that would be my advice. Be curious, be open to new ideas and new innovations. Don't always sit back and say, well, we can't do it anymore, which has traditionally been the kind of approach, because people are scared to make decisions and sign up on things that might be considered to be expensive and might not work, and allow things to fail. In business, we say, let things fail or let them fail fast, because if you're not innovating, then you're never going to progress.
And on the subject of change, what do you think the next 5 years looks like for the healthcare industry in the UK?
I think it's going to be a very exciting time. I think it's the next 5 years is going to be, change is going to be born out of need. We're in a very difficult position in the healthcare. We're constantly innovating. We're constantly finding new ways to spend money. We're developing new services all the time. And we have to couple that with the fact that we need support to every member of the population. Off the back of COVID, which, a lot of people think cite as an excuse. I don't think it is. I think it is genuinely something that really has caused problems across the health sector. There's a lot of things we need to do to catch up. But what it's allowed us to do is potentially innovate. So I think the next 5 years are going to be far more concentrating on how do we access patients and how do patients access us in their own time, at the time that suits them and in a manner that suits them. I think the health sector has to be far less rigid than it has been traditionally. That's probably easy for me to say, being an emergency medicine physician, because, we work a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week service anyway. But a lot of specialties don't. And I can understand why that hasn't been the case in the past. But I think the health sector needs to kind of wake up really a little bit, start to recognize where the need is and what time the need is and how people want to access it.
And cycling back to your own journey, what are you working on at the moment that you're excited about?
Once the health service gets its mind around the fact that we need to innovate and they start to accept that they're going to need to invest in these sort of projects and let people outside of the industry have some influence. So, sometimes the best thing to do is invite external expertise in. It can be from people who worked in the sector before, who are acting as advisors. But once you start to do that, you can let people innovate. And I think things like RMI are currently, we're experts in mobile provision of services. So we provide everything from a mobile clinic to, we can build an extension to an A&E department, we can staff it, we can deliver all sorts of things from mobile laboratory services. The list is limitless. It's only your imagination really that can to limit that. But what we've done is partner with KSIM, and KSIM are Europe's leading healthcare provider in terms of staffing. So that combination of the ability for us to deliver anything anywhere and be able to staff it, I think could help mitigate some of the problems the NHS is having at the moment, and for the next 5 years put it back onto a sure footing.
Dr Simon Le Clerc, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Healthcare Workforce Podcast, brought to you by Espirita Workforce Solutions. To hear more in our series of conversations with healthcare leaders, or for more healthcare workforce content, please subscribe to our channel, connect with us on LinkedIn, or visit espirita.co.uk. If you'd like to be featured on this podcast, or if you'd like to recommend someone to speak with us, just drop us a message at letstalk@espirita.co.uk.